kids shouldn't be forced to learn about LGBT issues. Well, Gabby, if you mean little kids, yeah. I do think that when someone's in high school, they should know what lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender is. They should just know the basic facts about those cases. I think in order to be an adult, you need to have an education about these things. I will never forget a conversation I had when I was in high school. I was in high school. I played the trombone in the marching band. And I played the trombone, and the only other two trombone players were two young women, both of whom I went very conservative small town. And both of the other two trombone players were very, very religious young women from my town. One day, one of these very, very religious young women said to me, she said, "Caleb, I heard that you think that being gay is not a choice." And I said, "Well, I don't think it is a choice, right? I don't think gay people choose to be gay. I think they are." And she said, "Well, I don't understand how anybody could think of that." And then I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, she put her arm around the girl next to her. She said, if I married her, that would be a choice, wouldn't it?" And I said to her, "Do you want to marry her?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, then you're not gay." And she's like, "Wait, are you telling me that gay people feel about other girls the way I feel about boys?" And I said, "Yes." And it was like a big oh moment for her, right? She had no idea. She believed that people were gay because they just wanted to rebel or they wanted to break the rules or something. She didn't realize that the basis of people being homosexual was that they had attraction to people of the same sex the way most people have attraction to people of the opposite sex. She didn't realize that. Well, it's important for people to have this kind of education. And you can't get this kind of education from the media, right? The media is crazy, right? So the basic facts for older kids, I'm not against, right? Just like you'd have to have education for kids to use condoms. Kids have to know, if an adult is doing something that is sexually inappropriate, to know, they're being molested or whatnot. So, I mean, I'm not against learning about these issues. What I don't think is, first of all, in the younger grades, I think that's more the parents' job in the younger grades as they get older. And there shouldn't be a political agenda in the education, right? It shouldn't be that, oh, we're teaching you this because it is therefore your duty to go organize in the streets and fight for. No, that shouldn't be it. There should be no agenda in the education. But people do need to know the basic facts of these things, right? They do. People need to know these things, but you know, um, yeah, but the other thing that I think is that, when I was in school, there was a huge amount of accommodating religious people. For example, the evangelicals in my area, they did not believe in Halloween. They thought Halloween was a satanic holiday. So my school actually changed the Halloween party to the Autumn Festival because they weren't, to accommodate the religious people that were against Halloween. And there was a huge effort to accommodate that. And even then, there were 2 or 3 kids who their parents were so against Halloween, they had to leave school because they couldn't, even though it was the autumn festival, didn't matter. It was Halloween, and that violated their religious beliefs. I don't understand why, nowadays, why don't we have the same accommodation? If a kid is a Muslim and he can't go to the Christmas party because they don't believe in Christmas, fine. The kid's a Jehovah's Witness, right? Fine. And why is there now this feeling that no, if the kid's family says we don't believe in homosexuality, that kid is required to sit there? Why? I'm actually working on a manuscript right now. It's something I'm working on. It probably won't be published for a long time because I got so much going on, right? And by the time I finally finish this book, it'll be a long time. But I'm always writing. I love writing, and I'm constantly writing political stuff. One of the things I'm working on is about, how to argue against wokeism. Kind of, it's like a book about arguing with wokeism, what wokeism is, etc. And one thing that I keep coming back to is when it comes to the LGBT stuff, right? The the how do I put this? Bullying is wrong. Bullying and discrimination is wrong. It is wrong to bully a kid because of the color of his hair. It is wrong to bully a kid because of the shape of his nose. It's wrong to bully the kid because of the tennis shoes that he or she wears. So bullying someone on the basis of the fact that they identify as gay or they present in a gender non-conforming manner is wrong. And what the woke people tried to do, and the basis of their deception, is they try to make everyone who disagrees with them into a bully. So it is very, very, very important that when you are arguing with people around these issues, you do absolutely everything you can to not appear as a bully. The issue is not your opinion about homosexuality. The issue is not your religion. The issue is, do you have just as much right with your family to practice your religion that maybe isn't okay with that kind of thing, or to practice your feminist beliefs that maybe don't? Do you have just as much rights as the LGBT people have? In America, we have the separation of church and state. Right? That is just how it is. We do not have a state religion in America. 9 of the 13 colonies had a state religion. And that's why in the First Amendment of the Constitution, the only way the American people would accept the U.S. Constitution was if it had a Bill of Rights. And the first amendment in the Bill of Rights, the very first line of it is, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or abridging free exercise thereof. That was the only way the American people would ever accept the Constitution, because Maryland was Catholic, Massachusetts was Puritan, Pennsylvania was Quaker, and the only way they could get all these different states that had different religions to be in the same country was there had to be a guarantee that we were never going to pick a favorite. We were never going to say, this is the religion the government believes in, and this one the government doesn't. And so based on that, our American schools can't be saying being gay is wrong because that's one person's religion, when somebody else's religion says, my interpretation of the Bible, whatever, says it's okay. However, and this is the other thing, you can't have American schools doing the opposite. You can't have American schools saying that people whose religion says that it might be wrong, which most religions historically and globally say you can't have the schools saying that those people are bad for their religious faith either. The government, all government institutions in America are supposed to be neutral on all religious matters. They're not supposed to be supporting Christianity, Islam, atheism, Judaism, Hinduism, none of it. And so because of that, if you want to argue against the woke thing on LGBT rights, the only ground you have is to say, I have my right to my religious beliefs with my family and my kids to say this is wrong, just as much as the LGBT kids and the LGBT parents have the right to their beliefs. That is the only basis on which you can argue the LGBT thing. If the conversation shifts away from there, it's a losing battle. You don't have any basis, right? The groomer thing, obviously pedophilia of any kind is not accepted, right? Whether it's straight or gay, no one can be molesting kids. They go to jail, right? But, at the end of the day, the basis on pushing back against the woke LGBT thing, the basis of it has to just be, just like you have the right to be you, I have the right to be me. And that is something that, unfortunately, a lot of people just can't wrap their heads around. People that are in the majority and are surrounded by people who agree with them often just forget that other people have the right to do and believe and practice and live according to their own conscience, even if it goes against the prevailing majority. Right. And I grew up in a little town that was run by evangelical Christians, and all the time they were forcing evangelical Christianity onto us, and they were violating the separation of church and state. They had ministers come into the school, teachers were given religious rants in class. Well, that was a violation of my rights. I didn't agree with it. My family was pretty liberal, and that was a violation of my rights because the school is supposed to be neutral on those kind of things. Well, I say the same for conservatives now. If you're a conservative and you go to New York City public schools, you have the right to not have pro-LGBT speeches shoved down your kid's throat. You have the right to say, if they're doing an LGBT pride parade and all the kids have to participate, you have the right to say, I'm taking my kid out of school, right? And that as long as we have the separation of church and state, you're on the list, as long as we have the separation of church and state in America, that's just how it has to be. And that's the only grounds on which you can argue, right? You have to argue. And this, by the way, this is the way the LGBT rights movement won. When they argued on these grounds, they won. People said, you know what? They said, you do your marriage your way, according to your conscience. We have the right to do our marriage our way, according to your conscience. And the Supreme Court looked at it and they said, you know what? You're right. In America, we don't have a state religion. The basis of opposing you doing your marriage this way is religion. So you're right. Well, and they were right. I think they were right. We don't have a religious government in America. So we have absolutely no grounds on which to tell anybody you can't have gay marriage, or, you can't have gay marriage. You can't have polyamory, or what do they call it? Polygamy, right? I mean, they were right. And that's how the gay people won the argument. They didn't make it about our way is the good way, your way is the bad way. No, they didn't make it about we're trying to convince you to change your beliefs. They made it about I got a right to be my way, and we don't have a state religion in America. And that is how they won the argument. And now that things have shifted, that's the only grounds on which you have a way to argue against it. And you have to use that same argument that says, I have the right to be a Muslim. I have the right to be an Orthodox Jew. I have the right to be an evangelical. I have a right to be a Catholic. I have a right to be a Hindu and not go along with this, just like you have and had the right to not to do what you did when it was in the minority position. Right. And that's the only basis on which you can argue. And everyone hates bullies. Everyone hates bullies. Let me repeat this. Everyone hates bullies. If you're a bully, you're an asshole. And I know there's probably people watching this right now that are bullies. If you are a bully, you are an asshole, right? Everyone hates bullies. And it might make you feel good on the internet when you're surrounded by people who already kind of agree with you, to like kind of repeat nasty things about people and insult people, but that's not a winning argument, right? That might be fun for your little bubble on the internet to act like a bully, to use slurs, to insult people's appearances, to be nasty and hateful. That might get a lot of fun and attention and be entertaining to your little circle on the internet, but in real politics, it ain't an argument. It's not an argument. In real politics, that is set up for failure. If you ever look like a bully, you lose the argument. And that is what the woke people want to do. They want to frame it as every person who does not agree with everything, every aspect of this LGBT stuff, every single aspect of it is a bully. And that's how they win, because everyone hates bullies. Everyone who's ever been bullied or experienced bullying says that sucks. And so they frame the argument a certain way where they present every person who disagrees with what they say as being a bully. and that is how they win. Well, I'm sorry, but every female athlete who has a question about women's sports is not a bully. Doesn't mean they're necessarily right. Don't know enough about the issue. But I know a number of women who are feminists that have issues about women's rights that are not bullies, right? They're not beating anybody up. They're not shaming people for who they are. They're just saying, based on my knowledge of human anatomy and athletics, I don't think this is right. And they have the right to say it. And the same goes for, there are many people that say, based on their assessment of the medical stuff, that young children shouldn't be given puberty blockers. Are they bullies? Are they trying to make sure these kids get? No, they're actually concerned about these kids. They're not bullying these kids. They're saying that these puberty blockers are bad for them in the long term. Well, they're not bullies. They might be wrong. I am not a medical expert, and I have no interest in debating this because I'm not a scientist. But they're not bullies. And the only grounds on which you can argue against the woke, LGBT agenda, the only way you can argue against that is by arguing, number one, on the basis of I have the right to be and have my conservative beliefs, number one. And number two, making sure that you never sound or act like a bully, because you lose. You lose. The minute you sound like or act like a bully, you lose. Historically, this is true, right? Before gay marriage was legal, they used to say that Fred Phelps was the best friend the gay rights movement ever had. Did you know this? Because, Fred Phelps was this crazy pastor from Kansas who wore a cowboy hat and would picket the funerals of gay people, right? He would picket the funerals of gay people, and and he had signs that said "God hates fags," and he was the best fundraiser the gay rights movement ever had. He was so hateful and nasty and mean spirited. People would come to the fundraiser and he'd be outside with his cowboy hat on and his big signs, "God hates you. You're going to hell. You ugly faggot. You're evil." And he'd be out there on a bullhorn with his big signs. People would go into the gay rights fundraiser. They'd open up their checkbooks and they would write checks like you wouldn't believe. He was the best friend the gay rights movement ever had because he looked like exactly every person who has any ounce of sympathy for the LGBT community would see that guy out there with his "God hates fags" and his cowboy hat and his on the bullhorn. You all are a bunch of disgusting animals. You're going to burn in hell. They would see him and people would just open their checkbooks, right? Because he sounded like a bully. He sounded like a person who committed hate crimes. He picketed funerals. For goodness sakes, he picketed funerals. Someone has just died. Their family is weeping. And instead of, saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry your relative died," he was out front with his bullhorn going. Right? Well, don't be that guy. If you want to argue against something that is being promoted in the name of LGBT rights, you don't want to be that guy. You don't. Right? You don't. And honestly, you don't really have much of an argument. Now, if you say you're against gay marriage, on what basis? On what basis? On what basis are you against gay marriage? Are you against gay marriage because it opposes your religious beliefs? Well, we don't have a state religion in America. So, you don't really have a basis, right? The only grounds on which you can object to anything LGBT is you just can argue that you have the right to be you and practice your beliefs with your family, with your kids, with your church, with your community, just as much as other people do. And that's the only thing you've got a basis for. Remember that, right? I am sorry if there are people watching this that disagree with me, and if you move to another country, it's not the same, right? You move to another country where they do have a state religion, they have an Islamic government or a Christian government or a Hindu government. You're in another country where they do have, there is a legal basis for arguing something else, but other than that, that is my thoughts on that, right? Gabby, it's a long answer to your question, but it's important. And that, that people that use derogatory words, people that are out there acting like bullies, they are the best friends historically of people that are promoting the LGBT thing. And honestly, most of the LGBT stuff you can't really argue against. Gay marriage, right? People's right as adults to be transgender, you can't really argue against. The stuff people are concerned about at this point is stuff that is happening to people that are underage, stuff happening to people without the consent of their parents. Women have concerns about spaces that are reserved for women being violated by people that identify as women, but were not born with female anatomy. You know, those are different things, right? But if you're going to argue for those things, it has to be on a different basis. So that's all I can say. That is all I can say. You know, so yeah, I hope that answers your question, Gabby.